the jury. One corrupt commissioner. One corrupt commissioner who holds all of the decisions of the Midlands Gambling Commission in her hands. One corrupt commissioner who on December 16th, 2015, walked into the VIP room of the Black Bear Casino and picked up a bribe from the casino's owner, Avery Bancroft. One corrupt commissioner who is the defendant in today's case, Chase Covington. Now, on October 1st, the Midlands Gambling Commission announced that they would be giving out a new bid for a casino license. And historically, when these bids are given out, proposals are drafted up, submitted to the commission, and looked over by the commissioners before the vote is taken. However, this one happened a little differently. This casino bid included private backroom meetings that needed a security guard standing watch outside the door. This casino bid included private backroom meetings that included pat-down searches and the confiscation of cell phones. It is unheard of in the state of Midlands for a casino owner to own more than one casino. Avery Bancroft was willing to pay whatever price to break this trend, and the defendant, well, she was willing to be bought. And to prove to you that this occurred, we've had to prove three elements today. The first is that the defendant was a public official, and no one here in this courtroom today contests that. Second is that the defendant received something of value in exchange for an official act. And the third is that the defendant acted with the intent to be bribed or receive something of value in exchange for this official act. You have heard evidence, you have heard testimony today that proves just that. You have seen evidence that the defendant is one corrupt commissioner. First, you heard from Detective Mickey Keenan, and Mickey Keenan was tasked with investigating corruption within the Midlands Gambling Commission. However, Mr. Keenan didn't have to look far because from the get-go, he was paired with the defendant, who was one corrupt commissioner. You heard from Detective Keenan that on April 13th, 2015, Avery Bancroft wrote, "Yes" equals 150K, and slid it to the defendant. Right at this very moment, the defendant had a choice to make. She could have walked out of Suite 312, gone straight to the police, and reported Avery Bancroft for trying to bribe a public official. But that is not what the defendant did. The defendant had the audacity to sit there and say no and ask for an even larger bribe. You then heard from Mr. Del Sesto, and Mr. Del Sesto was also present at this meeting. He took room service to Suite 312, but before he could go in, Danny Hoy searched him and even the cheese plate he was bringing for anything that could be used to record what was going on in this private backroom meeting. You heard from Mr. Del Sesto that Miss Covington picked up her briefcase and said, "I want a new one of these if you catch my drift." And not even 2 days later in the mail, a brand new briefcase arrived addressed to Avery Bancroft. But this is not the last time Mr. Del Sesto saw that briefcase. Mr. Del Sesto saw that briefcase 2 more times. One time in the hands of Avery Bancroft in the VIP room, and the next time in the hands of the defendant as she was leaving that casino. Lastly, you heard from Ms. Minettos, the defendant's stepson. You heard Ms. Minettos say that the defendant said, "Whoever I vote for will owe me big," and that this is an expensive business. Ms. Minettos also found a bank statement indicating that $200,000 had been deposited into the defendant's account the day she voted for Avery Bancroft to get a new casino. Now, you heard from Corey Hyde today that that briefcase that Avery Bancroft took to the blackjack table didn't just have pens or an iPad or some pens or a piece of paper in it. That briefcase was stuffed full of money. And Avery Bancroft stuffed that briefcase full of money before he went and met with Ms. Covington. Today's case really isn't as complicated as the defense has tried to make it seem. one corrupt commissioner took a bribe. One corrupt commissioner took a bribe from Avery Bancroft. One corrupt commissioner took a bribe from Avery Bancroft, and the very next day voted for Mr. Bancroft to break precedent and be the only casino owner in the history of the state of Midlands to own 2 casinos. Ms. Covington got up there today and said that she had many reasons to vote for Avery Bancroft's proposal, and I agree with her, but those reasons were not contained within this proposal that she said she reviewed. The reasons Ms. Covington had to vote for Avery Bancroft's casino were contained within the briefcase she walked out of the Black Bear with that day. I am confident that after reviewing all the evidence and testimony you've heard today, that you will find the defendant guilty of bribery. Thank you.
Do you want every minute or?
Yeah, every minute. Opposing counsel, members of the jury, may it please the court, do the right thing even when nobody's watching. Something we've all heard while growing up. Something that Ms. Covington lived her life by. Something that Ms. Covington made no exceptions for the Midlands Gambling Commission. With Ms. Covington, she does things by the books. It's October 1st, 2015. The Midlands Gambling Commission announces that they'll be accepting proposals for a new casino license. A couple months later, Avery Bancroft expresses interest in some of this. See, he's already had some experience with running casinos. He's already been had the Black Bear. So throughout several meetings between the months of March and April, Mr. Bancroft and Ms. Covington, they meet with each other, trying to get on the same page with one another, just trying to see what they should expect from each other. What does Ms. Covington want this casino to include, and how much Mr. Bancroft expects this casino to generate for Midlands? Finally, April 17th. The day the Gambling Commission decides who will get this casino license. Avery Bancroft, who's already had years of running the casino, or J.C. Blanchard and Shannon Starks, both of whom have a history of failed businesses. So of course Ms. Covington voted for the better businessman, because she does things by the books. Yet the prosecution, they want to paint this as something else. They want you to ignore the fact that Mr. Bancroft has already generated millions of dollars from Midlands, has already had several years of running the casino, has already had first-hand experience in running a business. They want you to believe that there was some sort of top secret, under the table deal between Ms. Covington and Mr. Bancroft. But ladies and gentlemen, that just isn't true. Over the 6 witnesses that you've heard from, over the 3 hours of testimony that you sat through, has anybody gotten in that chair and said, I saw Mr. Bancroft pay Ms. Covington? No. But Ms. Covington told us that I gave Mr. Bancroft the casino license because he had the best proposal. Yet the prosecution, they still want to bring a charge of bribery against my client. They have to prove that Ms. Covington was a government official, that Avery Bancroft paid Ms. Covington, and because of this payment, Ms. Covington voted for Avery Bancroft. You see, we as a defense, we don't have to prove anything. We didn't have to call any witnesses, enter any evidence. I don't even have to be here speaking to you guys right now. But we did. I am. Because we strongly believe in Ms. Covington's innocence. But the prosecution, they have to prove all 3 of those elements beyond a reasonable doubt. beyond a reasonable doubt, all it simply means that you can't have the slightest doubt that any of those elements are true. If you have to take an extra second to think about it, have a second thought lingering in the back of your mind, then that right there, that's reasonable doubt. That burden is right there. Prosecution's table. So you can't shift, you can't change, you can't lessen. Hold them to that burden. Now let's look at the evidence and the testimony that the prosecution claims to prove that a bribe took place. Word from Corey Hyde, A.B. Bancroft's assistant. He told us that Mr. Bancroft and Ms. Covington, they met with each other to talk about business, talk about what would be included in this casino, talk about what it would generate for Midlands. Mr. Bancroft, he spoke about business. Mr. Bancroft, he did things by the books. Ms. Moser wants you to believe that Ms. Covington is one corrupt commissioner, but she's not. Ms. Covington told us that though she's not an elected official, she's appointed, she still does things for the better of the community. She donates to the public, chooses a casino that would bring in more money, chooses a casino that would bring in more jobs. Why? She doesn't have to do that. She does it because it's her favor back to the community. Ms. Covington, she does things by the books. Earlier in today's case, my co-counsel, Danny McCullough, he told you that the state was basing their case on a brittle foundation. The investigation conducted by Mickey Keenan. See, the state, they're pointing fingers at my client right now. Whenever you point fingers at somebody, there's always three pointing right back at you. Mr. Loring, he told us about this investigation. He told us that the state's investigation was flawed, that Mickey Keenan wasn't trained, that this investigation never received authorization, that Mickey Keenan wasn't supervised, that the Midland State Police Department failed to follow all the national guidelines. See, it's not one corrupt commissioner, it's one corrupt police department. The prosecution, they also called Tracy Minettles. She told you that she never goes to work with Mr. Bancroft or Ms. Covington. She's not sure how these business meetings are done. That Mr. Bancroft came over, they had some drinks. And the prosecution, they want to prove that this is the beginning of a bribe. But Ms. Covington told you that this was the extra mile that Mr. Bancroft was willing to put in. That Mr. Bancroft was willing to meet with Ms. Covington outside of business hours. But Shannon Stark and Jason Longstreet, they weren't. Mr. Bancroft, he did go the extra mile. But not in the way prosecution wants you to believe. Going the extra mile by just taking the time off to speak to Ms. Covington. Something Shannon Starks, they couldn't even do. Tracy Minettles also told you that Ms. Covington said, "I would never trade my vote for any favors." Ladies and gentlemen, that's reasonable doubt right there. The prosecution wants you to believe that there was some deal, some secrecy going on. But that just isn't true. They told you that Mr. Del Sesto saw a swap of briefcases. Mr. Del Sesto, he got, 20 minutes of sleep? He told you he went in the room and he put the cheese down and he left. He didn't analyze Mr. Bancroft's briefcase. He didn't analyze Ms. Covington's briefcase. That's reasonable doubt right there. Hold them to that standard. See, Ms. Covington, she told us everything she looked at. She told us that she took into account A. Bancroft's history of economic success versus Shannon Stark's history of expired food. See, that's what Ms. Covington looked at. The prosecution, they want you to ignore that. They want you to ignore the fact that Ms. Covington does things by the books. before I sit down, I want you guys to understand something. It's now your turn to do things by the books. So in a couple of minutes, you walk through those doors and you start deliberating, talking about whether or not you think my client did accept the bribe. Think about what we heard. Think about what we didn't hear. Nobody got in that chair and said, I saw Mr. Bancroft pay Ms. Covington for this casino license. But Ms. Covington told us, I gave Mr. Bancroft the casino proposal because he had the best proposal. Ms. Covington, she does things by the books. We're confident that you will find Ms. Covington not guilty. Thank you.